More than 150 journalists are reporting around the clock on events in Germany and the world. A war like a video game, staged as a spectacle, but paid for with the lives and taxpayer billions of Americans. The bill for President Trump's Iran attack is coming, and it will be higher than the US president wants to admit. We have totally destroyed the island of Karg, and maybe we will hit a few more times just for fun. Why not? This sentence from President Trump will likely linger long after his war against Iran one day ends. Not because of its strategic content, but because of its disturbing tone. In the White House, the war in the Middle East under this US president is not only conducted unconventionally, but also staged as a spectacle. President Trump calls his attacks beautiful. On social media, the administration disseminates these beautiful destructions as video clips with the best highlights. Shamelessly, scenes from video games are even edited in Donnernetzets. This unprecedented gamification of horror conveys a disturbing message. War is fun, at least if you possess an overwhelming and arguably the most modern military power. A bomb drop from 10,000 meters altitude might seem like fun, but President Trump's demonstration of power infused with entertainment value has its price. First and foremost, people are dying, not only Iranians but also Americans. 13 US soldiers are officially reported to have been killed so far, and about 200 wounded. There are rumors that the actual numbers are higher, reported by individuals in contact with soldiers. The nightly calls to parents whose children were sent to war and who will not return alive are a stark reality. What President Trump calls a short expedition is, even after 3 weeks, far from over and lacks a clearly communicated objective. And added to this are the dizzying costs. These two could become a major political problem for President Donald Trump. The very president who vowed to radically cut state quotas and government spending is now squandering billions of taxpayer dollars. Especially at the beginning of the military operation, costs reportedly exploded. Modern warfare burns through vast amounts of money due to its high-end weapons. In the first 48 hours alone, expenditures amounted to $5.6 billion, according to US media reports, citing internal figures from the US Department of Defense solely for the replacement of expended ammunition. And in the Washington think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, estimates that an additional $3.7 billion in unplanned costs were incurred within the first 100 hours. Within 6 days, the total sum already reached at least $11.3 billion. Meanwhile, daily costs are said to have stabilized at a high level. The Center for Strategic and International Studies anticipates around $891 million per day, primarily driven by air and naval operations as well as the continuous replenishment of expensive precision weapons. Even cautious scenarios now suggest that a 2-month war would incur an additional $65 billion. Other estimates, depending on escalation, range up to $95 billion. And all of this could be just the beginning. Because the US government is long preparing for more. The Department of Defense wants up to $200 billion additionally from Congress. This is a sum that almost corresponds to a quarter of the annual defense budget. President Trump's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, recently commented on this billion-dollar sum with the laconic words, "It takes money to kill bad guys." Chilean President Trump himself calls this price very small, measured against what it achieves, an Iran that can no longer threaten its neighbors and the United States. In Congress, this view is not limited to the Democrats. Even within his own party, resistance is growing. The conflict with Iran has long reached President Trump domestically. The $200 billion package threatens to alienate two factions within his own party: isolationist voters who largely reject foreign interventions, and classic fiscal conservatives. The silence of J.D. Vance testifies to one faction. For the other are the so-called fiscal hawks, libertarian-leaning Republicans who want to reduce the tax burden and government spending as much as possible. And they are sounding the alarm. For them, this war is not only a military risk, but also one for the state treasury. They have a point. Such unplanned emergency funding of this magnitude hits a state whose debt has already exceeded $39 trillion. National debt, one could argue, remains invisible for a long time, because these are costs shifted into the future, which appear rather abstract to voters. But the enormous costs of war do not end at the walls of the Pentagon. The uncomfortable truth is, wars are not only fought on battlefields. They are paid for at the gas station, in the supermarket, and in the long term, through rising interest rates on a growing national debt. The war is already driving energy prices up at an extreme speed. Attacks on oil infrastructure in the Gulf and uncertainty around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil trade routes, are causing markets to react. The consequence in the US is rising gasoline prices and unforeseen pressure on inflation. The burdens on American consumers are becoming ever higher. And this is the part that is missing from President Trump's fun rhetoric about the bombardment in the Middle East. The Iran war is a rather expensive video game for the US president. The costs could ultimately even exceed the estimated $200 billion. Because this modern war is a bit like modern video games, President Trump pays by subscription on a monthly model, and when it ends does not seem to be within President Trump's power. The newly issued 48-hour ultimatum to Iran cannot disguise this. The next expensive escalation is then very likely to come. It is President Trump's subscription war without an end date. What's your take on Trump's Iran war, costly video game, and mounting debt? Share your view in the comments. Do you think this will matter in the next news cycle? This video was generated using artificial intelligence